Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach. Welcome to episode 163, Opening a Writing Session. I'm really excited about the episodes that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks because I think we don't talk a lot about what actually happens when we sit down to write. Here's what I mean by that. So, for example, I occasionally meet with other colleagues and we'll talk about projects that we're working on, but nobody says, well, when you went to your writing session, what did you do in there? Or how did you get started? Or, after you sat down, what was the first thing that you did? We don't really talk about that a lot. And so, what I wanted to do is open that up for discussion, just like we're opening up a writing session, but also encourage you to really think about the ways that you get into your writing. We touched on this the other week in one of our episodes on settling into writing. And that episode was more about how do you sort of calm your body down, get your brain ready to transition to actually start writing. And I will put a link to that one in the show notes. But now I really want to talk about the step-by-step process that it might take you to actually start writing. And what I mean by that is that we don't just randomly jump down and sit at a desk and start writing the second we get there. There's always some kind of an opening process. And so I like to think of how do you open a writing session? How do you close it? And this week's episode, we're going to talk about the ways that I open a writing session. And I'm going to invite you to pay attention to some of the ways that you might be doing it. Because sometimes if you're not able to start writing, sometimes the problem can be during the opening process. And there's just some ways to think about it. So not getting settled down, as that other episode I mentioned talked about, might be one of those reasons. But there can be all kinds of other things. So I'm going to share some slides for today and just show you some pictures of how I open a writing session and also describe them for people that are audio only. So first of all, usually when I write during the week, I am driving to the spot where I'm going to write. And that's because I do most of my writing at work. I usually do it in the library. So the picture I'm showing on screen is me in the car. I liked this picture for an example because one of my daughters made me a bracelet that said "write" as a reminder to write. And that particular day when I took this picture, I was wearing it. But I can also see from this picture, it looks like I'm parking. I'm moving into the parking lot where the library is. That's the thing that I do before I go to write. You might be doing something else. It might be a walk across campus back to your office. That's where you're going to write. It might be a walk to a coffee shop. It might be right after class, you taught a class and now you have a classroom empty for an hour before another class, and that's where you're going to write. But for me, the opening of the writing session really starts for me on my way to get to my writing. So you can determine how long this time might be or the space might be. But for me, my drive is roughly 10 minutes. And I mentioned before that I often in my opening a writing session or kind of getting ready to write, I have playlists that are on Spotify. I call them academic writing pregames. So I'll link to the latest one in our show notes if you want to check that out. But I do that on purpose. So when I leave my house, I hit my little, playlist. I'm driving to work. Usually some kind of like motivational music of some sort, just to kind of get me in the brain space to do it. So part of me opening my writing session actually happens before there's any writing going on at all. So driving is my way, but you might want to think about what is happening before I get to the writing process. The next thing that happens, so this is a step-by-step process. How do I actually open up my writing session? My next step is to find a spot in the library. I don't always stay in the same spot, but I'm a kind of a creature of habit with writing. So I just find a spot where I'm going to be. I lay down my notes, my pen, my coffee, and I flip open my laptop. This is crucial. So the picture that I'm showing on screen actually shows me flipping open a laptop, and there's actually a document on screen. Here's why I do that. One of the best things that I've done to open my writing sessions to help myself is before I leave to drive, I open up the document I want to work on or my project management system or whatever it is that I'm going to need when I get there. And I actually open it up first, close my laptop, jump in the car, drive. Once I get in the library, the very next thing I do is open my laptop so that document or whatever it is I'm working on, it could be like article notes or whatever it is I'm doing, that shows up first. This is intentional. I know from tons of faculty consultations that one of the things that derails people from actually opening the writing session and getting into their writing session is because they sit down wherever they are in their office or whatever, and they immediately go to email. Because a lot of times email was the last thing you were working on, or you might go to a class prep or something like that. But usually email is the culprit. That's the thing that's on your screen. So one of the ways I get around that is to make sure that my document or whatever it is I'm working on is the thing. When I open up my laptop, I literally open it up because I sat down at the space where I'm going to write. I make sure that is the thing that's up. And for me, that does sort of head off any temptation to do any emailing or to get out of whatever it is I'm working on. So out of a lot of tips that I've worked on over the years, this is one I feel pretty strongly about, because when we open and close laptops, when we go places, a lot of times the thing that is on the screen when you open it up is the next thing you're going to do. So if you were working on making a spreadsheet, or if you were working on designing something for class, it's really hard to walk away from that. So just a quick click of the tab or opening up whatever it is you're working on, a lot of times can be a way to just say, hey, I'm sitting down now, it's time to write, and it means you mean business. So this is also a strategy we recommend to our graduate students that are working with our Defend, Publish, and Lead coaches, because many of them will say, well, I sit down to write and I waste a bunch of time. This is another way to kind of make that dissertation front and center. The next thing that I will do on a Monday, this is not every day, but usually a Monday or a Tuesday, is I will look at my Asana project management chart. So we've done episodes on Asana. Everybody knows I love it. And for the record, I don't think you have to use Asana project management software to be able to do this. Lots of people have an old school chart. Some people are using Monday or Trello or an Excel spreadsheet. It really doesn't matter what it is. But one of the cases that we've made on this podcast is to make sure that you have some kind of a project management system where you store everything from your ideas to projects that are in process, wherever. It's basically a spot to hold your projects and know where all the pieces are. So it's your go-to dashboard to decide, what am I working on? What do I still have to do? And so on. So I switched to Asana about 2 years ago, and I really like it. I just use the free version. So what's on screen right now for people listening audio only is just my Asana dashboard where it shows all my projects. So I like to do this on a Monday or a Tuesday when I open a writing session, just to get a grip on what's still there. What do I still need to work on? I can set up tasks that are completed. I can set up a calendar. I really haven't used it in that way. I just like to have a spot to store the pieces. But why I'm going here first, whatever project I'm working on, part of me opening up my writing session for the day is for me to click on that project, open it up, and just get an idea of whatever it is that I'm working on still in that project. So it's kind of a way to refresh my memory, let's say between like Friday and Monday, what am I supposed to be doing on this article or this book or whatever the project is. So I don't do this every day, but it is a good way for me to do it. You can do it every day. So I do have lots of clients that do, and what they do is before they leave for their writing session, they open up Asana, walk, drive, take the subway, whatever, to wherever they're going to write. And then when they flip it open, Asana is the first thing they look at. That's also a great way to go too. So it basically, especially if you maximize your screen and you're showing that could be a really good way. If I would open up a project on here, I would see a list of tasks. And then for some people, that's a really good way to open up a writing session, because they don't have that floundering around feeling, what am I supposed to be doing right now? So that's something that might happen when I open a session on Monday and Tuesday. What happens on all the other days is I usually make a decision right then and there what kind of writing I'm doing during that day. And for me, I have really 3 types of different writing type tasks that might go in a writing session. One of them might be straight up writing, like I've opened my document, I might refresh my memory on whatever tasks I have to do, but then I'm going to open my document. And if I have worked on it the day before, I usually don't have to reread it again. Sometimes in my document, I'll leave myself a couple comments for the next time. Or I might even have like an old school Post-it note slid inside my laptop, like, hey, don't forget you're on the bottom of page 16. You were going to do X, Y, and Z. So one of the things that you can do for yourself is write some notes after every writing session. So we'll talk about closing writing sessions, but that's one of the best things you can do, is to leave notes to your future self, whose brain is going to be fried by the time that you get there. A lot happens to us between writing sessions. We're not the same people that we were yesterday. So that would be a way that I might kind of get into it. If I have trouble getting started, one of the things that I might do is read what I had written before. I might look at some notes. If I'm still just sort of like, I don't really know what I'm doing right now, I usually have two other techniques, and I have pictures of both of these on screen as well. So one of my pictures just shows a run-of-the-mill writing session. From what I can see, it looks like I have a printed out draft and some comments, and I'm making some edits, and I've got some notes and stuff. The other two pictures that are shown, one is a whiteboard. In my library where I work, we have whiteboards and markers everywhere. They're just rollable, so I can move them around the library. But something that I will do if I'm really, really stuck or a piece of writing isn't working well, I might open up a writing session by just re-outlining the section that I'm working on. And that helps me remember, what is the major point I'm trying to make here? Is this other point more important, less important, not really relevant? It needs to go in another section. And I've done some really solid organizing of writing in this way, but also the new writing, because usually by trying to reorganize or outline what my original content looked like, almost always I find a new way to present material, like clean up transitions. So I have a picture of that, of a book chapter that I was working on a long time ago, of what that might look like. I usually have a couple different colors of markers, and I always take pictures of it with my phone. So I might start out that way for 5-10 minutes looking from the picture on screen. This looks like I might have spent as long as 30 minutes. I always take pictures so I have them again. And sometimes when I open a writing session, I will look at those pictures on my phone to remind myself, hey, this is what you were doing with your chapter, remember? The last thing that I have shown on screen is Penzu. I use Penzu and Asana not interchangeably, but kind of in tandem. I also have an episode on Penzu. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. This is an online journal that's nice and clean, where I can have entries on different writing things I'm working on. So I like this one better because it gives me a little bit more room to write in a space that's more writing friendly. But sometimes in here, I'll just make a task list for a writing session for that day. So for example, I'm a big fan of planning to get planned for your week. You could plan for your writing session, and I know in busier periods, I will do this. So sometimes for closing a writing session, I will make a plan for what I need to work on next. So in my opening for a writing session, I will log into Penzu, go open up that note. And to make sure I remember to go to Penzu, I will sometimes have a Post-it note in my laptop that just says open Penzu first. And that way I'll look in there, I'll see the note. I usually title them something like work plan for February 1st or something like that. So that way I can also keep that plan open. And what's shown on the screen, you can see I actually have strike-throughs as I tackled some of the tasks. So these are all ways that once these are all ways that I open a writing session, meaning I kind of get myself ready to do some writing. Very few people can just run into a place, flip open a laptop, and get going. So for me, even now, these are all things that I do to kind of trigger my brain and make sure that I start working. I do want to say what happens when you can't write in your writing session. I'll probably make a separate episode about that, but just a quick, actually a couple quick things that I will do. I mentioned before that outlining, sometimes if I'm really stuck, I'll kind of outline and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. But let's say I'm in a scenario where I have to generate some new content. I don't even have anything to look at to outline. Another thing that I will do is often I'll take a stroll through our library stacks. I might go outside. I might take a 10-minute walk before I write. I do that a lot. Sometimes that's helpful. There's lots of different ways that I might approach that. Another thing that I do, if I look at how I want to handle a writing session going forward, I'm going to stop sharing with this one right now. So those of you that are audio listening, I don't have anything on the screen right now. Another thing that I will do to open a writing session, I mentioned all the time that I have coffee with me. I have coffee right now on screen, because that is something that is also kind of a trigger for me to write. I've mentioned triggers when you open a writing session. So you might have a special song that you play. I talked about that on settling in to write. You might have a special soundtrack you listen to while you write. That might be a way to get some writing triggered and started. It is one of those things when you're opening a writing session, the more that you can ritualize it or have a set pattern of behaviors, the more quickly you can get writing started. If you need help from Defend, Publish, and Lead and kind of setting up an opening writing ritual, we're happy to talk with you. We do free consultations. Another place where you might learn about some writing, I have mentioned before that we have a partnership with the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. That's another place that you can go and look. If you just type in Textbook and Academic Authors Association, you can find them right away. Joining their organization allows you to have access to lots of resources. But one of the things that they tend to do too is actually talk about how to do the writing. So this is another place where you can get some tips, and we're happy to be a partner with them again this year. Happy writing this week.